first thing we're going to be doing is I have the lesson that's available as the answer key for the previous session that Amanda just did. That one doesn't have the collision in it yet. So the first thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be going through the steps once again of building up collision from scratch as a group, all live working on this. So it might be useful to have to do that anyway. But if you'd like to go into a breakout room and work on this for your particular issue, that's totally fine.
I was checking if I was muted. Popped the mushroom up into the air and it didn't fall in the game. I don't know if that signifies anything.
Yeah, I think that your mushroom, you did set the collidable on it, but I don't think it's a physics object. So it should still receive collision events, but it makes sense that the gravity wouldn't be doing anything to it. Mm-hmm. All right, but for right now, let's go ahead and, unless there's any other questions I can help with, which I'm happy to. Okay, let's go ahead and let's get started with the next session then. I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna share my screen. And like I was saying, where we're starting out for this here is I have the answer key. So this is in that repository that we showed everyone earlier. This is the add background music project. This is an already completed template that is up to the end of the last session. So assuming that the sessions were done completely in order and we hadn't improvised or sort of gone as the opportunity presented itself. And so what that means is that this has everything that's in here that we needed in here to place the objects onto the scene, to make them invisible until we went and talked to the quest giver. We had the conditional logic set up so we could figure out the distance to the quest giver, make sure we're close enough, talk to them and make them appear. But one thing that we haven't done in this particular project yet, which we have done in a bunch of the ones that you guys are already working on, this one doesn't have its collision detection set up yet. So far, this one isn't currently picking up the potions. What I figured we'd start with, because again, repetition is really valuable for trying to hammer home concepts, especially really weird and complicated ones like collision, which has a lot of little gotchas in it. What I want to do is, with your guys' help, I want you guys to tell me how we can make collision work in this. So right now, I'll very quickly just sort of skim over the scene and talk about the code that's in it. Right now, our class main is a game and it's a keyboard listener.
Excuse me, William.
Yes.
If you can increase the size just a notch or two.
Yes, thank you. I forgot to do that again. Thank you for stopping me.
No problem.
How is that for the size? Is this better?
Awesome.
Okay, great. So currently, the class main is a game and it is a keyboard listener. We have some variables set up for the player, the NPC, and the potions. And importantly, we have our background music in a variable up here. We also have our Boolean for having triggered the quest. Once we're into
you should add the collision 3D listener to the class. So it's game, keyboard listener, collision event 3D listener.
That's right. So let's go ahead and we can add things as we find them, as we need them here. So I'll go ahead, and since we're going to be doing collision events in our game, one of the things we're going to need is our game needs to support collision events. So right now I have class main is game, it is keyboard listener, comma, collision listener 3D. So I've just added that one section of the code to the top of the class. A whole bunch of lines on my screen are green now. I am not done with this particular step yet. What am I missing?
You need a library.
Yep. So thank you, Andrew, Tim. We are missing our library statement. So there are a couple ways I can do this. I can go and I can add it manually by typing. I could press Alt-Enter for the shortcut. I can also open the context menu. In this case, I did it with the right click. And I can see there is add use for libraries.interface.events.collision listener 3D. So I now have at the top of my file, use libraries.interface.events.collision listener 3D. Can someone remind me what that line of code means? Why do I need this? What is this doing?
It's inheriting a bunch of background code that you guys wrote.
As Tim Lockwood has said, it is in fact magic. We have performed the sorceress incantation to please the, no, the, like you're saying, yeah, there is code that is written elsewhere that exists inside what we call libraries. All we're doing here is we are asking, hey, I would like access to some of the code that was somebody else already wrote. I want to use that code for my own stuff. And the reason we need this is because when we're saying class main is a game, it is a keyboard listener, and now it is a collision listener, we want to make sure that our game, our main class, can take advantage of the structure that was already written in something else. It knows how to take advantage of collision listening code that was already written in another library that we're taking advantage of. So at this point, we've added this collision listener 3D. Skimming back through the game once again, in my create game action, which is where we start all of our game setup, the scene gets loaded and we find our player and our NPC by finding them by their names. We, for this example, we've set a little bit of physics information on them. The player has some linear damping. I don't believe this was discussed. Does anyone know what linear damping is? I see. I see someone shaking their head. I see someone performing magic finger waggles. Pranav?
I think it would probably be some sort of reduction of linear velocity by default.
That's
just
right.
Going by the name.
So the way that linear damping works is it's kind of like, you can consider it kind of like air resistance. The idea of linear damping is that it takes whatever momentum is being applied onto an object and makes it sort of just fall off gradually over time, depending on how big the value is. In this case, we've set linear damping on this character to be 0.1. And this does something somewhat similar to if we worried about, it was mentioned before that it's like the floor had no friction. So it was like an ice rink. It was just sliding endlessly on this. And the character didn't have any friction either. So they're just sliding endlessly. One of the ways that this could be solved is by saying, I want to apply basically air resistance to this object. I want there to be linear damping. I want to reduce the amount of linear velocity this thing has. When it moves, it should lose speed over time. Yep. I can't see the chat without opening it manually. We have one other physics property that we've set here. We set player can rotate to false. So I know that a bunch of people have that included in their stuff. Basically, this is, once again, we don't want our guy to fall down or to just sort of slide, not just moving around, but also sort of spinning in place. So we have set that to false for right now. If we wanted to, could we still rotate the player manually ourselves? I see one person shaking their head.
I don't see why not.
So that's one for yes, one for no.
I think you can. I think you can.
Yeah, you on pitch stuff.
So the answer to this is yes, we can. We have set it so can rotate is false. That means it cannot be rotated by physics. This is a physics related command. So if I'm going to keep using this example. If a train hits our guy is going to go flying, but he is going to be perfectly unrotationing. That's definitely in the dictionary. You can look it up. I use it in Scrabble. It's worth a lot of points. Our unrotating character will go flying, but they won't spin. They won't topple over because physics can't rotate this character. But if we wanted to, we could still do it ourselves by saying player : rotate or some of the other commands that let us do this. We have a lot of flexibility as programmers to do things that we might forbid the system from doing automatically for us. So we've set a couple of these physics properties on our player. We have in our game these variables for potions, which we have named blue potion 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. We find them in the game the same way we did with our other stuff, and we are hiding all of them. Our music is loaded here as well. we find, for this particular example, an obnoxiously jaunty tune called Funshine. We set the volume to be low because otherwise it will destroy my eardrums, and then we play it here. In particular, when we load it to stream, as we saw in our previous session. After that, we add a keyboard listener. We provide the me value. Can someone remind me what me means in this context?
This class.
Right. When we are doing this, when we called add keyboard listener, we could have given it a different keyboard listener object. We could have made one somewhere or written some other code, and we could have said, add keyboard listener, this other thing that we've made. But in this case, the thing that we want is the thing we're currently working in. This code is running inside of main, and main is the thing that we want to say is a keyboard listener. So this code just says, the source of this code, the thing that's currently running this code, that's the thing I'm talking about right now. Add the keyboard listener to the thing currently running this code. So once we've done that, this should theoretically allow us to receive keyboard events, which is useful. We're going to be using those. We say enable physics 3D true. We would like to have 3D physics. So that's really important, as Stefik has discovered. And we set our gravity to a default value, so things are drawn down towards the ground. That is the end of the create game right now. Is there anything else I should add here for our collision listener? For our collision events?
Would you want to add the collision listener open paren me close?
That's right. Just in the same way that we have to add the me value to that keyboard listener, we want to, we are saying, system, please tell me when keyboard events occur. We also need to say add collision listener me. In the same way, we want to say game, when collision events occur, please tell me. I am listening for collision events. I want to be informed about this. All right. Scrolling down a little bit further, the next action that we have is our update action. Inside of the update action, we have a single line of code that is music : stream. And so from the previous session, what is this doing?
Playing the music.
Right. So if we don't have this, our streaming audio will not work. And in fact, I'm actually going to comment this out for a second for anyone who hasn't actually tried to see what happens if we do this way. I don't think I'm sharing my audio, so I actually don't know if anyone heard that. Did anyone hear what just happened? Let me reshare my screen with audio because we're going to be, this is an audio lesson. I should probably do that. So I will share sound this time. And I am going to run my game. Did everyone hear that? When I played my game, I got about maybe a second, maybe less of audio. And then it just stopped. And the reason for this is because with our streamed audio, or what you might consider buffered audio, basically the gist of what's going on is in the same way that YouTube doesn't want to load an entire hour-long video all at once to give to you over the internet. If we have a really big audio file, we could just load that audio file on the computer, but that could take a bunch of resources because it might be an hour long. When we have our streamed or buffered audio, we're basically saying we just want a tiny little piece of it, just the part of it we're using right now. And this stream command that we're using inside of our update action is basically saying, I need a little bit extra of that audio buffered in advance so that I don't run out when I'm playing it. That's basically what the stream option is doing here. But that's a review of what we've done. We're still moving ahead on this collision listening system that we're working on. Do we need to add anything to our update action for our collision listening?
I don't know.
That's an entirely reasonable answer. It's okay to not know things. Tim has given a thumbs down. Any other?
I think you need to. I think you need to do something in the update section. Update action.
Okay, so that's a vote for doing something in the update. It does kind of make sense that update is getting called on every single frame of our game. So reasonably, we might want to do something here related to collisions. But part of what is useful about the collision system is that even though it's doing something at every single frame, the game can go take care of that for us. Because if we wanted to manually check for collisions on every frame, this is where we would do it. In the update, we might do something where we say, if the player coordinate intersects with the potion coordinates and there's a certain threshold around them, like a certain distance, we say it's close enough, but then we have to manually check it for the player and then the first potion and the second potion. And now we have to check for the walls because we don't want to go through the walls. And it gets very complicated to do that ourselves. So even though it's happening on every frame, because we're going to let the game take care of it for us, we don't need to do anything on a per frame basis. This is kind of like with input polling, when we talked about that before. We could do this ourselves, manually checking on every frame, and it would be a lot of work. And it would also be a lot of time spent basically going to the system and checking on every single frame. Hey, did this happen? Hey, did this happen? But right now we're doing event handling. And so our goal is to just set up a little bit of stuff that the game will let us know when things happen. We don't have to check it ourselves on every frame. So we don't need anything for our update action.
Yeah, but would you need it if you were queuing your collision events?
If you were queuing your collision events. I'm not sure I quite understand.
So let's say you want a certain event to happen in a certain part of your game.
Sure.
So that means you have to queue your events, right? Then put your events in a queue and write code to say that, okay, if you reach this part of your game, then this collision happens, something like that.
Oh, sure. So we're considering what if we're doing something along the lines of if you have like separate levels, maybe.
Yeah.
That is true that if we had multiple levels, we would have to put in some extra logic to sort of think ahead about how we wanted to handle it for different places. Because if our first level involves us going and picking up potions, but our second level involves us going to slay the dragon, the code that was used for picking up the potions in the first level is probably not useful for us anymore. So we might need to do something to organize that code. We're still not going to use the update for that because we can, that's still something we're going to let the event handling handle the individual collisions for us. And then checking where we're at in the game to handle things, that's more going to be along the lines of using our if statements and our conditional logic in our event handling to handle that stuff for us. Does that make sense?
Yep, it does. Yeah, it does make sense.
Okay. So any questions before I continue on with the rest of our program as it exists right now? All right. I see a thumbs up and otherwise not the sound of a bunch of people asking questions. So we'll take that as a success. Let's look at the next action here. Action pressed key. Inside this action, we check to see what key was pressed. This is our keyboard listening event. And then if it's up, down, left, right, or space, we are setting an amount of force within a vector. And I did modify this slightly from the solution that was up on the repository to use linear velocity instead of force because I just think it runs smoother that way and I liked it better. Without going super deep into this action, do we need to modify our pressed key action for anything regarding our collision handling?
No.
No, that's right. The press key is part of our keyboard handling. It exists independently of whatever we're doing with our collisions. Even though theoretically pressing the forward arrow might make my guy go forward and bounce into something, that part could cause a collision, but the press key isn't the thing that's actually handling the collision. It's just making my guy move. The fact that collision might occur from it is kind of incidental. Collisions could happen for any number of reasons. We don't have to manually handle it here. And in fact, it would be very complicated to try and handle it here because if we did it here, what if my guy got hit by a train and then got pushed onto the potions? We wouldn't be handling it in that case. It's better to separate it out into its own sort of part of the ecosystem. Let individual things handle the things they're responsible for. So past the pass key or the press key, we also have our release key action. Similarly, this is part of the keyboard handling. I don't have anything in here for collisions. Nothing needs to be done. But that's the end of my class right now. So currently, what else do I need to do in order to support collision in my game?
You need a collision listener routine. You will get 2 items and you need to know what's colliding with what and then take some action.
Right. So we're going to need, as Bernard said, a routine. We need an action here, something that gets called by the game engine when we are experiencing a collision. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make a new action. Can I call this anything or does this have to be something? What happens if I gave this just an arbitrary name?
I think the engine is not going to pick it up. You'll have no way of calling it. You could give it an arbitrary name if you were doing manual collision processing, but you're not doing that.
Right. When I make this, it has to be a really specific name because the game engine is looking for something that I have because I said, hey, I'm a collision listener. Please add me to the collision listeners. Please tell me when collisions happen. The game doesn't know that I have something that it's called Action Bob, because how could it know that I have that? I could write any code here. It's looking for something really specific. So if I want to be informed when a collision happens, when it starts, what does this need to be called? Does anyone remember or have their code to look from?
I have the code. Hold on. I'm going up.
Okay.
It is begin collision.
Begin collision. That's right. And is there anything else I need there?
Yep. You need 2 parameters. Collision event 3D event. So you need a parameter.
All right. So I have just added to my class action begin collision left paren collision event 3D space event right paren. I've added an empty line and then an end. I always try and add my ends to my actions immediately. So this code is going to get called when a collision occurs. Before I do anything else to start fleshing out the logic in here, let's actually see if this works. And with collisions, it's pretty frequent that you'll find that they actually don't work right away because there's a lot of fiddly little details that have to be figured out in order to make sure the right things collide. So I'm going to output hello world inside my begin collision here. Now, oh, I am missing something. I skipped a step. I have an error. I could not locate a type named collision event 3D. Did you forget the use statement?
Yes.
I sure did. So I am going to add a use statement for libraries.interface.events.collision listener. Sorry, not collision listener. I already have that one. Collision event 3D. Okay, now that I have that, any questions before I actually test my game here? Okay, let's go ahead and run this. And so I have just received in my console, hello world repeated about much more than, I was about to say a dozen times, but more than that, certainly. So what's going on? Why do I have all of these messages? My player hasn't moved anywhere.
It's colliding with the ground.
My player is colliding with the ground. That is true. And
your ground is colliding with all kinds of crap.
That is also true. In our stuff, anything that isn't, anything that's a physics object can collide with other physics objects so long as they aren't both unmovable. Basically, that means that 2 walls right next to each other, I think, I actually might be wrong about this. I think the system is smart enough to say, these 2 walls that can't possibly move, I won't bother sending you a collision event on them. But it's going to tell you about everything else, which includes the player every time that he touches the ground, but it also includes if that NPC is considered to be a physics object that can move, he's touching the ground. It goes with anything that is in here that might be responsive to physics. Now,
William, it's possible, I don't actually know for sure, but if you have two unmovable objects and they overlap, it's possible it'll send you a begin collision event, but never a complete, because they will always be colliding. I could be wrong.
that would make sense. I don't remember if it might not check for collisions between two unmovable objects for performance reasons. It's actually not super important.
No, it's not, but I was just trying to think what that
care
is.
about two walls that can't move intersecting, but you might be right.
I'm not sure. I just wanted to point it out, but I'm not actually sure I'm
Yeah,
right. So,
no, that's a good
sorry.
point to make. Thank you for that. Out of curiosity, I would like to know where all of these collision events are coming from. What I would actually really like to do is I'd like to make it so that my begin collision can tell me what is touching each other, right? Does anyone know how I could do that? First question before I even try and figure out how do I report it from the game is how do I, as right now as a programmer, what's touching? How do I know? How can I find that out?
It's reported by the event. You get 2 items, and I can paste the code somewhere if you like, but basically you have 2 items, item A, item B. It's usually A that's colliding with B, and you can print out their names. But what I've seen in some of the code is you've got some typecasting to do before that. And then you do a get name and you can get their name spoken.
Right. So first step of all that, I have an event. I want to get the items from it. So I'm going to start by, I have my event variable. I'm going to type event. I would like to get something out of the events. What do I need to do that? Really down low, like syntax question. What do I type on my keyboard right now to get something out of the event?
Colon, down arrow, down arrow, down arrow till you reach get item, I think, or
Yeah,
whatever
so
it is called.
I use colon to try and retrieve values from these variables, things that have extra code inside of them that I'd like to get access to. For the event, I am going to get, we can see in the code completion here, if I were to arrow down, there is get item A and get item B. These will retrieve for us the values of the 2 items involved in the collision. If I type this here, right now my code is event colon get item A. This is technically correct code. I could just do this, but it's not super useful to me right now. Why isn't this useful for me? If I want to use this, what do I need to do?
You have to output it, wouldn't you? The value that's in A?
I am going to need to output it, but importantly right now, I'm getting item A and I am not storing it in a variable and I'm not outputting it directly because it's, you can output integers, you can output text and numbers and Booleans, but something like an entire item is very complex and the engine doesn't know how to output that. It doesn't know how to just take that entire thing and just turn it into text. So what I'm going to do is I am going to assign this to a variable. I'm going to say item 3D item A is equal to event colon get item A. And I want to do this again for the second item. So just based off of the previous line, item 3D item A equals event colon get item A, left paren, right paren. What do I need to do to get the second item?
Same thing, but with item B.
That's right. So it's going to be item 3D item B. This could be anything, honestly. I could name it just like Bob or Foo or whatever. The variable can be anything, but it's useful to name it something that means something to us. So item B is equal to event colon get item B, left paren, right paren. And this part has to be get item B. That is the name of a piece of code that lives inside of the collision event 3D file that someone else wrote somewhere. Once I have these, I want to output their values. So I'm going to replace my output hello world. And in the same way that I got information from other things, I'm going to output item A colon, because I'm getting something from inside item A. I'm going to ask it for its name. I'm going to say output item A colon get name. I would also like to output the name of the second item. What do I need to do there? Ideally, I'd like to do it as part of that same output segment, so I don't have like multiple lines of text for one event.
Concatenated with the plus.
Concatenate it with the plus. So right now I have item A colon get name, left paren, right paren, plus item B colon get name, left paren, right paren. Does this seem good, or should I change it?
Do you need to put any spaces in, or does that happen automatically?
It would probably be better to put some spaces in, because right now it's going to take the name of the first thing and the name of the second thing and just slap them together, and there's going to be nothing in between. It'd be better to have something in there just to help delineate for us. So I'm
Blank
going
space
to,
between quotes.
yeah, I'm going to concatenate a space using quotes in between the two. So right now it reads output item A colon get name, left paren, right paren, plus open quote, space, close quote, plus item B colon get name, left paren, right paren. Any questions on this before we run it again and give it a go, see what all these things that are colliding are? Okay. All right, and Stefik was absolutely right. All of these walls are in fact intersecting. We are getting messages for them. So
We got that on tape, right? Isn't that, did we get that on tape? I'm just gonna just put that in the loop.
it's okay. We can fix it in post-production. It's fine.
I think so. That's probably right.
So we'll very crudely just replace your voice saying the right thing with my voice saying the right thing,
I like it.
like
I
text
like
to
it.
speech.
Of course.
But right now we can see that a bunch of the walls are intersecting with each other. The floor is intersecting with a bunch of the walls. Some of the poles that are touching each other that are the sort of support beams that are used in the smithy. Interestingly, looking at it, there is only one collision event for the player, which is actually less than I was expecting, because it kind of bounces when it comes into the scene, but it seems it doesn't bounce far enough to actually get off of the floor enough to get another collision event. You can even kind of see, if you look really closely, player character is sort of wobbling a little bit on the floor, but he's still touching it, so he continues to have that collision event. So I just closed my game. At this point, actually, before I close the game, let me run it again and let me show you where we're at. So, still outputting a bunch of stuff. The goal at this point is I can move my character around. I want to move over to the blacksmith, our NPC, our quest giver. I press the Q button. He informs me that the evil Lord Bunnykins is rampaging across the countryside and that he requires 5 blue potions, which are, in fact, barrels in this game, in order to create a potion to strengthen us. And at this point, the object is to go over to these barrels, and if I touch them, nothing happens, and that's what we're looking to fix right now. So, we've already done some work on this, but let's, once more from scratch, figure out how we're doing this. We're hitting the barrels. What needs to be done to do something about it, and what should happen when I touch them?
It should have a collision event, right? So
It should have a
output
collision
the
event.
names.
And right now, that's a really good point. The first thing we should notice is that even though I am outputting item A and item B, their names when collision events occur, in the console, I did not receive any collision events for my player touching those barrels, which is going to be a problem because I would like to collide with them. So does anyone have any thoughts as to why it might be that The player can collide with the floor, but it doesn't seem that the player is capable of colliding with the barrels.
Did we set the barrels to be collidable?
That's an excellent question. And if we go up and we look at our create game where we pulled our potions out and we said hide, right now, we do not set any code on the potions or the barrels as they were to make them collidable. I didn't need to do that for the player though. So why is it different for the player than it is for the barrels? Double checking myself to make sure we didn't actually say collidable on the player. But yeah, we did not set collidable on the player. So why is it the player can collide, but the barrels can't?
Is that because that we set the physics enabled on the player on the scene screen, and then but we haven't done that on the portion object? Or...
Right. You're on the right track here. The answer here is that if I go and I look at my scene and I go into the 3D layer and I look at my player has physics enabled on them. A physics object is capable of collision by default.
That's the floor.
Thank you.
Sorry.
My player, as well as the floor, apparently, my player is collision enabled because he is physics enabled. Anything that has physics enabled is detectable, is collidable by default. If I go over to the barrels and look at the floor again, right now, the barrels are not physics enabled. So I have two options, essentially. I could turn physics on them. What would happen if I did that?
You'll start getting collision events when you collide with them.
We'll start getting collision events when I collide with them. Is there any downside to doing this?
They'll be colliding with the floor immediately.
They will be colliding with the floor. That's true. We will see that.
You'll bounce off of them when you collide with them.
That's right. Because they're physical objects, if I just want something like a power up or something, that I run into it and then something happens, I don't usually expect that the power up is then going to like throw me backwards because I just ran into a wall, which is basically what's going to happen if we turn on physics on the barrels. If they are physical objects, I can push them and they can push me when I run into them. So it wouldn't be the end of the world. It would be, you run into it and then we would do whatever code that we're going to do and then you would get bounced back a little bit and it would be fine in the grand scheme of things, but it's probably not exactly what we want. I would rather enable them, I would rather make them collidable without turning on physics if I can. So how would I do that?
You've got a set collidable option.
That's right.
For the barrels, you're allowed to set that in code.
That's right. So in the code, I'm going to go down to below where I have all of the potions that I've found them from the game by their names. And I'm going to add some code that makes them collidable. So I'm going to say potion 1, colon, because I'm doing something using the code inside of this variable. Does anyone remember what this is called? I believe it is
set collidable.
I think that's right. I start typing it here. Yep, I can see it here inside of code completion, set collidable Boolean flag. So I'm going to set collidable to true. And now I am going to copy paste this so that there are a total of 5 lines that say this, because I don't feel like typing that all out each time. We're going to make it true for each of the potions. So right now, for potion 1, potion 2, potion 3, potion 4, and potion 5, I have done colon set collidable to true. Question here that was, would we want to have the set collidable Boolean in the if statement for starting the quest? That is actually a really good question. So if we do this right now, and we've done it outside of our stuff, to turn on the quest, basically. Right now, these potions are hidden, they are not visible on the screen, and we have set collidable to true. Is that a problem? What happens if we run into these before we've gone and started the quest?
You'll still collide with them, won't you?
You will still collide with them. That's right. Even though they're hidden, and we can test this and we'll make sure, because obviously I'm not infallible. But I bet you that if I go walk my character over here and I sort of look around, yep, I can see that I've just received collision events for player and blue potions 2 and 4 as I walk through them, even though they are not visible on the screen right now. So there are basically 2 options that we have here, at least as far as I see. What could we do to resolve this? I think Adam's already mentioned one. We could go and we could change our if statement down below that when we start our quest, not only do we make each potion visible using the show command, we could make them collidable there as well, right? What else could we do? To give you a clue as to what I'm thinking, because I don't expect you to be able to read my mind, as helpful / terrifying as that would be. In our stuff where we check to see if we should show the potions when we trigger the quest, we have a Boolean that we're using right now, has triggered quest. We have a way of telling if the quest has started yet or not. One other option we could use is that we could go into our collision and basically say, if you collide with a barrel or a potion, we only do some stuff if you started the quest. And if you haven't, we just ignore it for right now. We use our if statements and we check to see if the quest has started when we collide with them. We could do it either way. Do people have a preference?
I think the second way sounds better because you could then scale it up later if you wanted to add more conditions. So let's say you wanted to say that, okay, we started the quest, but you got to find the first beer barrel and then all the other barrels.
Okay. That feels reasonable that you could, yeah, you could use this for other things besides just that. That being said, I suspect that we'll have to try it. There's possibly some downsides to doing it that way as well, that we are receiving collision events even when we haven't touched it. And we'll check to see if the quest has started. But we'll have to do some extra bookkeeping besides that. What are some other conditions where I would have to worry about touching the barrels even after I've started the quest? Are there any?
Can you still collide with them after collecting them?
That's the other concern that we have. If we add these to the game and we make them collidable right from the get-go, and we check to see if the quest has started, we can immediately go and touch them, but nothing will happen because we haven't started the quest yet. If we go start the quest and then we come back, we touch one of the barrels, that barrel will do whatever it's going to do because the quest has started. And then in the code that you guys were working with previously on Amanda's session, we then hid the barrel. But as we have seen, you can touch these hidden objects even though they're not visible. So even though the quest has started and the barrel's invisible, theoretically, we just run over the same barrel multiple times unless we do something else. It's possible that we could do something besides hiding it. We could take it out of the game entirely, then it wouldn't have any more collision events. We could do something else with other checks to make sure you don't touch the same barrel multiple times.
Basically, you mean not using the dispose, just we control it with condition?
It is possible, yeah. Instead of removing it, we could use more conditions to check it. The reason that I'm bringing up this line of thinking isn't necessarily because I'm trying to tell you guys that there is one correct way of doing this, but I feel like it's helpful when you're approaching these kind of problems to kind of think about the long-term goals you have for whatever you're working with. In this case, because we want to make sure that we can't touch the barrels too early, and we'd really like to make sure that you can't touch them after you've touched them again, we just want to be thoughtful about how we're going to implement that. You don't have to have everything solved right away. As a matter of fact, it can be problematic sometimes to think too far ahead. But for right now, the core of it seems to be, if we decide to make these barrels collidable at the very beginning, we will face different problems than if we make them collidable a little bit later. For right now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take the collidable code for these potions. I'm going to cut these out of here, and I'm going to move this down to when we start our quest. For the reasons that Pranav was mentioning, we absolutely could do it in the other location. We could have it at the start and then just use some logic to test for it. We'll just end up with slightly different challenges that we have to face as opposed to doing them here. So right now, I have just made these potions collidable inside of our pressed key action. We can now do something to interact with the potions only once we've started our quest. Let's go ahead and run our code and make sure it actually works like we think we do, because it is very easy to think that your program does something else than it actually does. So I'm going to run over here and just kind of sort of scan around the area where I suspect these are. And as I'm moving around, I am currently not finding the items. I am finding that my movement is just a little bit strange, and that if I ever try and move a diagonal, it actually messes with my movement, but that's a separate issue. So at this point, I'm going to move over towards the quest giver, who is somewhere off in the smithy that I can't see because my camera's a little bit warped. I have successfully managed to find him, so that's good. And we're going to move back over towards these potions now. And we can see that now I am capable of intersecting with these, and we're getting the collision events as we would expect. At this point, we need to do something about the barrels that we're running over. What do we want to do in order to actually proceed with the quest? How do we want to do something with the barrels? What should we do? We can start with broad ideas first, or we can get into specifics, whatever works. But basically, let's just start finding a direction. What should we do from here?
Count them.
We need to count them. That's right. The goal here is that we're going to end up picking up all 5 of these, so we should probably count them in some way. To start with that, let's go ahead and make ourselves a variable. Where should I put this variable? I want a variable that counts how many barrels we picked up. Where does it go?
In the class.
In class. Why don't I just put it in the begin collision? All the times I'm going to be changing this value are in begin collision, so why not just put it there?
Because you will need to reference this later at some point.
That's true. I am going to need to be able to actually use it outside of the begin collision for other stuff eventually. Suppose that I didn't. What if it was only just inside begin collision? Would it be okay to put it in there if that was the case?
Not unless you had the ability to declare static variables in Quorum.
Definitely not something we're going to try and cover right now. But yeah, the gist of it is, if I tried to put this variable inside begin collision, even though that feels like that might be a reasonable place because this is where the collisions are happening, the problem I'm going to have is if I say in begin collision, integer, we'll call it potion counter. If my integer potion counter equals 0 right here in begin collision, I then increment it when I touch a barrel. But then I leave that begin collision action. Like Stefik was saying before, there is this concept called scope. Basically, this code only exists between, on my file, between lines 176 and 182. And once I reach the end of that code, that variable goes away. It's not there anymore. Because as far as the program's concerned, you only made it for inside this block of code. This is the only block that it matters for. And because it goes away, it can't store those values that we're going to need in the future. In order to make sure that it sticks around and that I can put a value in it and then get that same value back each time, I'm going to need to take this variable. I'm going to put it up at the top of my file along with our other variables that we have up here. So now up among our other variables, including the player, the NPC, the potions, music, and our Boolean for triggering the quest, I've now also added integer potion counter equals 0. Any questions about any of that before I continue? Okay. And oh, before I continue, I haven't been keeping track of the time. This isn't an hour session, right? When does a session? I have time, right? Trigger the objects goes until 1 o'clock. Okay, cool. We have 45 minutes left for this.
William, I have a
Yes.
question. So portion counter is fine, but we have 5 portions, right?
Yep.
And then each one has different name slightly.
Yep.
In my line of thinking, if portion counter goes above 5, then we can make all the portion uncollidable. However, with your slip of finger, you might, pick up the visible portion 1 and then just accidentally hit another, different wrong key and then back up and then hit the hidden portion 1 again. And that's going to count for the portion 1. So, but that's my kind of thinking or question.
Sure. I'm really glad that you're actually thinking about this issue, because this is something that we are going to have to address. What Ko is saying is completely right. If we go and we make it so that every time you pick up a barrel, it just increases the potion counter by 1, what stops you from running over the same barrel multiple times? In that case, you don't actually have to go pick up all 5 potions. You really only need 1 and the ability to zigzag on top of it, right? Not the most heroic thing ever to go defeat the evil Lord Bunnykins. This is something that we're going to have to address. So let's consider how we're going to do that. Let's start by going back down to our begin collision. We will need to address this in some way, but before we can do that, we need to make sure that we're even touching one of these barrels in the first place, right? How do we figure out if we are interacting with one of these barrels, that the player in particular is colliding with one of these barrels, and it's not something like the floor per se?
You check in the collision event, what are you colliding with? You can get the names of the items and you check if the player is colliding with the barrel. And if that is the case, then we execute whatever logic we have to.
Okay, so I'm going to write a line of code here, going kind of along the line that you're going here, and let's talk about it after. So I'm going to start by saying if item A colon get name equals player, and item B get name is equal to, I believe that I called it blue potion 1, capital B, lowercase p. Blue potion 1. Here is an if statement I have just written. If item A colon get name equals player, and item B colon get name, left paren, right paren, from the get names, item B colon get name, left paren, right paren, equals blue potion 1. First off, will this work for what we're trying to do? For specifically, can I use this to pick up the first barrel?
Wait a minute. Okay. I think you'll have to have another condition. Maybe you can, because what you can do is inside this, you'll have to check if the quest has started or not.
So that's, yeah, one of our concerns is what happens if you haven't started the quest. That's a legitimate concern. For this particular case, because we have specifically made it so the barrels can only be collided with, the potions can only be collided with once the quest starts, we should be okay for that for this particular instance, but that's a legitimate problem that we should be aware of. In this case, we're okay. We don't need to check it for this. But outside of that question, does this seem like this should work for picking up the first potion? I'm not hearing much, and I'm guessing the reason for that is because you don't want me to catch you on a trick question, basically. The gist of this is that this will probably work for the first barrel. There are some things that we should be mindful of, though. For particularly the first barrel, one thing that I am personally concerned about is, even though this will probably work, it seems like most of the time when we were doing this, item A was the player and item B was the potions. I don't know if that's actually guaranteed to be true. I think that the way this works is that in the scene, it tries to order these in a certain way. And particularly, I think that these potions were added to the game later than the player. So on a technicality, I do think this will probably work, that the first item will always be the player and the second one will be the potion. But that's really dangerous to assume because we don't really know that for sure. What happens if item B is the player and item A is the potion?
So suggesting putting an or and put a similar and condition so either one can be true?
Sure. So that's one possibility. We could do this by saying that using the power of and, we've checked to see if both of these conditions are true, that item A is the player and item B is the potion. We could use an or to then check the opposite. If it is true that the first item is the player and the second item is the potion, then do some stuff. Or alternatively, if the other way around is true, that the first item is the potion and the second item is the player, that's also okay. Let's go ahead and put that into our code so we'll see what it looks like. This is going to be a really long line of code, but that's kind of okay. I'm going to start by putting parentheses around the condition I already have here. So now I have if left paren, item A colon get name, open paren, close paren, equals player, and item B colon get name, left paren, right paren, equals blue potion 1, right paren, then we're going into our action right now. Nothing has changed so far other than I put some parentheses around this. The code still does the same thing. But the reason I want this is because I am going to add, or I'm going to add another condition. If something else is true, we'll also go into this function. It doesn't have to be the first condition if the second condition is true instead. I'm going to put more parentheses in here because this is going to be a separate condition. And these parentheses, the main reason I'm putting these here is just because since I'm mixing and or, it's going to get really messy trying to figure out exactly what this does if I don't use some parentheses to kind of fix the order of operations here. I'm going to copy paste the same thing that I had before. And I'm just going to change the values. So now the second condition is if item B, get name, is player, and item A, get name, is the blue potion, do some stuff. This line of code is so long, it's actually beginning to go off the edge of my screen. I am going to just put a new line here, and this is fine. You can break up code on the multiple lines here if they're too long. Does everyone understand what we're doing here? Any questions about this line of code and how it works?
Nope, makes sense to me.
So I just never understood that. So the program decide the item A and B by the order of which one is instantiated first in the machine.
I don't know this for sure, and I'm the guy who wrote that part. So actually, I didn't write this part. I think Amanda Austin wrote this part. But I mean, I'm basically the guy that does the game engine for a living, and I'm not positive on that. I just think that's true. And even if that's true, it's really dangerous to assume it, because what happens if the barrel that we have gets added and then removed and then added again, or if the player gets removed for some reason, maybe they died and then you had to like bring them back for some reason, it's really dangerous to assume that things are in a certain order in the engine. So usually try to avoid doing that. But yeah, I do think that on a technicality, I think it is true that item A will be whatever item was added to the engine first. Does that kind of make sense though, in terms of what that means and why I am cautioning, try not to assume that?
It does make sense.
Okay. So as an aside, in this particular case, it couldn't happen because of the particular stuff that we have in here. But let's suppose that this first statement, item A is player and item B is potion, and the second statement, the inverse, suppose that this were something else, somehow both of these were true. Would we go in here? If condition A or condition B, and they're both true, do we go into that if statement? To put it another way, supposing that I had a different if statement here, I'm typing if 5 equals 5 and 3 equals 3, these are both true. Sorry, not and. If 5 equals 5 or 3 equals 3, do I do the code inside the statement if both halves of an or statement are true?
Yes.
Yes. Kind of contrary to how English works, usually when you say or in English, the implication is exclusive. One thing or the other. One of those two, but not both, usually. In computing, the or means at least one of these things. Something here is true. It doesn't have to be both, but it could be both. So in that case, if 5 equals 5 or 3 equals 3, we will do that code. For this particular thing we're doing, we don't really have to worry about that because it's not possible for both of these halves to be true for this one, but I did want to mention that while we're working with the or, because I don't think we've touched or as part of these sessions yet, other than a snippet of code that was used for the velocity. Okay, all of that aside, talking about the ors and whatnot, we have just checked to see if the player is colliding with blue potion 1. What should we do when we collide with it? Assume that this is all correct so far, because it basically is. What do we do when we get in here?
Okay, you could either, so you need a way to record that the player has got a portion.
Sure. So yeah, step 1, we need to record somehow that the potion's been picked up.
So the counter goes down also, the portion counter, because you only have 4 available.
Yeah, so right now, we have that counter. For right now, I have it set up so that the counter starts at 0. So let's,
okay.
We could do this the other way too. Like you're saying, we could just set this to be a value that starts at the top and count down. But for simplicity, just because I don't want to change that code, let's start by incrementing the potion counter. So potion counter equals potion counter plus 1. Take the potion counter, get the value it already has, add 1 on top of it, stick that back in the box where the potion counter came from. Potion counter goes up by 1. Anything else we need to do?
Have some sort of output that says you got the potion.
That's a good call. Yeah, let's do something to show that we've got the potion. Let's say output, I'm going to say picked up potion, you have plus the potion counter. So right now I'm outputting, here's how many potions you picked up. I'm going to go ahead and run this and see what it does. I have to go, hold on, give me a second. I'm going to move the camera in my scene so I can see it a little bit easier here. I know where the smith is, so I can move over to him, but I'm going to keep doing that. I'm going to keep forgetting. It's mostly that it annoys me that I forget. So ask that quest giver, hey, go pick up these potions. I'm going to run over here to these barrels. I can't pick up most of these, but this one I can pick up because we only did this for potion 1 so far. I've picked up the potion, I have 1. And I move off of it and back onto it. Picked up the potion, I have 2. This is exactly what Ko was asking about like he was saying, if we don't do something, there is nothing stopping you right now from just walking on top of the same potion multiple times and just getting all of your potions from the same place, which is not how we really want our game to work. So before we do anything about the other potions, let's do something to fix this issue. What can we do to make sure that we can't pick up the same potion twice?
Change the collidable property and hide it, and hide the barrel.
There we go. So if we just hit it, would that be enough?
Nope.
No. As we've seen, it is possible to collide with hidden objects. So we want to take the barrel and we want to make it so that not only is it hidden, we also want to make sure that you can't collide with it anymore. But this gets us into the second half of this little problem that we worked into with the question of the difference between item A and item B. In our if statement, we check to make sure that one of these two has to be the player and one of these two has to be the barrel. Which of these two do we hide?
Well, you'll need another if statement.
Yep. The way that we're set up right now, unless we want to do something cheeky and do some changes to our other stuff that are beyond the scope of what we're going to worry about right now. Right now, if we want to keep this if statement the way it is, we need to do an extra check because we don't know which of these things we need to hide right now.
William, I would have thought that actually removing the first barrel totally once the player has gotten it would be a better option than hiding the barrel.
That's
Once
another.
you've got something out of it, you remove it.
That's a good call. So basically, if we just straight up remove it rather than hiding it, then we don't have to worry about it colliding anymore because it's not in the game anymore. And also we don't have to worry about seeing it anymore because it's not visible.
Yeah.
Are there pros or cons to doing it in the two ways? Is there any reason why it's better to just hide it and make it uncollidable as opposed to removing it? Or vice versa? On the surface level, they kind of seem like they do the same thing. So does it matter which we do?
I think it depends on how your game is being, how you plan your game. If you plan your game to be ongoing and using the same things over and over again, then hiding is a good option. But if your game is just, okay, once I have completed taking 5 barrels, I've won the game, something like that, then removing it will be the best option.
There we go. I think that Jafar just said it really well. Basically, the gist of this is the benefit of hiding it and making it not collidable is you could reuse it later if you wanted to. Maybe it's like, it's a power-up or something, and it comes back after a minute. So you keep it around so you can use it again later. Or maybe it's something else that has some sort of longevity to it. It's a coin that you don't just pick up once, but maybe it can be acquired the next time that you're in the area or something. If we want to reuse it again, keeping it around makes it really easy to just turn it back on. You just show it again and make it collidable again. If we remove it, then it's not in the game anymore, so we're not getting any more collision events on it, regardless of the collidable status. It's a little bit more work if we ever want to put it back in the game, because if you change any of its values, like its size or its position or its physics or anything, you'd have to do those again if you want to rename it. But in this case, we're not using this again. It gets used exactly once. So we could just remove it instead, and that would work just fine. We do still need to figure out this issue, though, of which of the two things do we remove, because we don't want to remove the player. It would be really bad if you tried to pick up the potion and you just kind of evaporated out of existence. So what we're going to do is we're going to add an if statement here. What should I do with this if statement to check which one is getting removed?
You know what you could do, because this is getting complicated. The first thing you do is let's determine which is the player, which is the barrel separately.
I think that's a good call. That's basically what I was talking about doing something cheeky up earlier. We might end up doing that in a moment here, but let's start by keeping what we already have and just adding this if statement for right now. But you are right that this is getting a little bit messy. We could make it cleaner by doing some legwork ahead of time instead. But for right now, let's just add an if statement. Which one is the potion or the barrel? What does that look like?
B is the portion or the barrel.
Can you take advantage of an if else and determine which one's the player and then remove the barrel?
Right, so we're gonna be using an if and we'll end up using an else. Give me the exact code I should write here. Someone tell me the code and I will write it.
Is that like if item A is blue potion 1, remove item, A and stuff like that, and then if item B is the potion 1, so you do yes, something like that.
And let me give you a cheekier solution. What you could do, because you have portion 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, is if the name of the item has the word portion, delete it.
That is a good call. We're going to work up to that. All of this right now, we're only just touching the first potion right now. But you're right, we're going to need to do something to make sure that we're doing it for all of these. Because the alternative is going to be that we're going to be copy pasting this if statement 5 times, and I really don't want to do that if we can avoid it. But to start off with, right now we have this if statement. If item A get name equals blue potion 1, do something. This is a block of code there that's currently empty. Else if item B get name equals blue potion 1, block of code, do something. Any questions or comments on this before we continue? Okay. One thing I'm going to comment on is that this else if portion, else if item B get name equals blue potion 1, it is harmless to have it here. This will work just fine for us. If you had decided that you just wanted to do an else instead here, this would also work just fine, because we know that once we're in here, the only way we're in here is if either item A is the blue potion or item B is the blue potion. Those are the only two possible ways we get into the if statement. Does that make sense before I continue on that? Why it would be okay to have just an else instead of an else if here?
Yeah, it makes sense to me.
Okay. Yeah, again, if you had the else if, totally harmless. It would be just fine to have that there too. Your code will still work. But I think it's useful to consider how you got into the if statement, just so you know what things might be at that point in your code. But at this point, we know that item A in this first half of this nested if statement, item A get name equals blue potion 1. That means that item A is the blue potion, so we can remove item A. Take it out of the game. It's gone. That means that it can't be collided with anymore. It's not getting any of its stuff moved around by physics if physics was enabled. It is no longer an entity inside of the game. If this was stored in a variable somewhere, we still have that variable. If this was, for example, inside an item 3D potion 1 variable at the top of our stuff, we still have that variable around if you needed it for some reason, but it's not in the game anymore. It won't show up, it won't trigger collision events, etc. Any questions about that before I continue? I don't think that we've removed anything from the game so far yet. Okay, just the other half of this if else portion. I've already removed item A in the other half. What do I need to do in this half?
Remove item B.
Remove item B. That's it. Remove item B. And now let's go ahead and run our game and see how it works. So I begin by moving over towards the quest giver, the NPC. I press my key to talk to him. He pleads for my help against the evil Lord Bunnykins. The barrels have appeared, and I move over towards them to collect them. I'm going to move into this first barrel here. And now that barrel is no longer visible on the screen. the output tells me that I have picked up a potion and that I have one. And if I move away and back into that space, I can't collide with it anymore. It's not there anymore. Barrel's gone, no one's home. So that seems to be working. The only problem we have now is that I can't walk into the rest of these barrels because we've only set it up for blue potion 1. So we have some options. Pranav was already talking about this, so someone other than Pranav, we'll see if everyone just remembers Pranav's answer already. But one of the things we could do is we could just take the code that we already have, this if statement for blue potion 1, and we could paste it 4 more times for the other potions. And then just modify it a little bit. So it's potion 2 in each place and then potion 3 in each place. I would prefer not to do that if we have a better way. Is there a better way that we can make this work for all of the potions, all of the barrels, instead of just one?
I think you could do a check. If potion 1 move, then let's say if potion 1 is removed, you could then say maybe like remove potion 1 but not the other potions until all potions have been dealt with.
Okay, so sorry, I'm trying to parse that out. So I think that what you're saying is that we could make it so that we have a check in it, so that basically once you pick up potion 1, the next one has to be potion 2 and then 3.
Yeah,
is that right? So you have to have an order
check,
how you pick them up.
Check, yeah.
That is something that we could design the game to do. That would change the gameplay though, because right now you can pick them up in any order, and I think that's okay for how we want our game to be designed right now. But there could be other games that it's entirely reasonable, but you have to pick them up in a certain order, right?
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah.
So
If you had a certain order, you could probably use something like a for loop or something, go through each time, but that's not what you're doing here though.
Yeah, even though this feels like the sort of thing that because we have a number of things that are really similar, this feels like, maybe a loop is usable here. But for this particular case with the collision, I don't think it would be the best tool to try and solve this problem.
Are you thinking about like putting all the portions into the array and then manipulate that way?
So if we were going to use a loop, that is basically how we would do it, is that we could put it all in an array, and that would actually work just fine. Before I start improvising, do we have arrays later in the sessions? Am I going to be taking Amanda's stuff if I do arrays here?
Let me double check.
I don't think we have arrays this year yet.
I don't think so, no. We can go into it, but it is like 20 minutes before lunch.
That's fair. This is maybe not the best time to touch on arrays.
I would avoid it. I mean, like, obviously a solution with arrays is more clean, but like, I don't think there's really any harm in showing how you do the conflated approach like you're doing, because then if you ever do arrays, you see why you would want it.
Sure.
It makes it more clear.
I actually think arrays would even be overkill for this problem anyway, but I like having the opportunity to touch on new concepts during the lessons. But I think you're right. Let's not touch arrays for right now. Now.
Yeah, I think you do arrays in spatial sounds, which is later in the week.
Oh, that's funny. Well, that's my own lesson anyway. So if I'm just taking it for myself, I'm not so mad about it.
Yeah, Stephanie, by the way, before we finish off, I have to skip the last part because I have to be in office by 10 a.m. my time, which is about another
sorry,
6
man.
hours.
We're not allowed to have real day jobs. That's just
I have one, so I have no choice.
fair. That seems fair. We're glad you can come for where you can make it, Jafar.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, and I'm sorry about yesterday because I was feeling quite under the weather. So, I was on medication and it was quite, it was like making me very drowsy.
Well, like I said, we don't judge. We're just glad you can make it for when you can. I'm glad you've been able to participate this year.
Yeah. So I will be joining you again tomorrow. Thank you so much for the lessons. It was great.
Absolutely.
Thank you. See you all tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.
So for right now, let's go ahead and let's solve this problem without using arrays. And I think that the way that we can approach this, let's start by, rather than using such a strict check, right now we are using in our if statement if item B get name equals blue potion 1. Can we change this to something else that's a little bit more lenient that will work for all of our stuff as opposed to just one of our things? All of the barrels or all of the potions instead of just one potion. Contains. In our code here, we are really specifically saying, does this string of text exactly match this string of text over here? Are these two things exactly identical? But it's really not necessary that they're exactly identical, because all we care about is just that we don't want exactly blue potion 1. What we really want is just any of the potions. And what all of the potions have in common is that their name includes the words blue potion, or just potion, potentially. So what we're going to do here is I am going to take the name values from item A and from item B, and I would like to pull them out from the item. So I'm going to start by just assigning these to values. So text item A, sorry, not item A. I am already using that name. That will not work. Text name A is equal to item A get name, left paren, right paren. I'm going to do the same for the second one. Text name B is equal to item B colon get name. So far, all I have done is I have just taken the things that I'm using in this if statement. Item A, get name, left paren, right paren. Item B, get name, left paren, right paren. All I've done is I've just taken those values and I put them in a variable somewhere. I haven't accomplished anything yet. What do I need to do to actually make this useful in some way?
You have to put those variables now into your if statement so that it will be universal instead of being specific named.
That's a good first step. Let's go ahead and replace our calls inside of our if statement with the variable. That way it'll be consistent everywhere. So name A equals player and name B equals potion 1, or in the if statement, that is, if name A equals player and name B equals blue potion 1, or name B equals player and name A equals potion 1. One thing that's nice about this is that the line of code is a lot shorter now. I can actually fit it on my screen without having to break it up on 2 lines now if I wanted to. But we're still doing the exact same check right now. All we're doing so far is name A exactly equal to player, and is name B exactly equal to blue potion 1? In order to check what we want here, rather than checking for exactly blue potion 1, we want to check just to see, does this name have blue potion in it? What we're going to do is we're going to use some of the code that's stored inside of our name. For a lot of the stuff that we've been doing here, we've been seeing that if I have an event, for example, I can do event colon get item A, and the collision event 3D that this event is has some extra code written somewhere in a different file that does some stuff when you ask it to please very nicely go do this thing that is called get item A. You can do similar things when you have values that are text or integers or booleans or numbers, sort of the things that are the basics or the primitive variables. You can ask them to do stuff for you too. In this case, I'm going to say in my if statement where I have name B equals blue potion 1, I am going to replace this with name B colon contains left paren blue potion, and I'm going to remove the 1 that's in here, and now I have another parentheses on the side. Or to, maybe it would be better to separate this out of the if statement so that it's not quite so condensed here. Does everyone see what I've done here? So my if statement now reads, if name A equals player and name B colon contains left paren, open quote, blue potion, close quote, right paren. and then another right paren, or, and then I have the original condition still on the second half. Name B equals player and name A equals blue potion 1. Does it make sense what this code is doing so far?
Yes.
Okay. Am I done with my if statement? No.
Well, you need
So
to
you're
change
ignoring
it.
the, sorry. So you're ignoring the number at the end, but now you also have to fix that in your other half of the or statement so that
That's right.
it makes the same test.
I am not doing it in the second half of my test right now. So right now, if the second item was the blue potion, was a blue potion, any blue potion, it would work. But if the first item is the potion, it'll only work if it's potion 1 because I haven't changed the second half yet. So let's go ahead and change that one as well. This becomes name A colon contains left paren, and it needs a right paren at the end of it because it needs to surround this bit of code that I'm calling, and I'm removing the space and the 1 at the end of it. So right now, my code now reads if name A equals player and name B contains blue potion, or name B equals player and name A contains blue potion. As an aside, I'm still doing this strict check, this exact equals on name A equals player and name B equals player. Do I need to change those two? See Adam shaking his head. The answer here is no. It's there's only one player. There's not many players. I just have the one that I care about, and I could change this to be contains player. If I did, it would technically still work because the name player contains itself. It doesn't have to be like extra stuff on the sides and then it happens to have like a nugget in the middle that's the correct thing. If it's the exact same thing, contains will say, yeah, you're good, and it would let you in. But if we don't need to, you probably don't want to when it comes to this, because what happens if in the future we had another thing that was, suppose we had an item that was in the game that was called player seeking missile. That would be bad for our player, who would probably like to not be hit by a missile, but also suddenly the player seeking missile is capable of picking up the potions, which is probably not what we want. So if we don't need to do this, we might as well just leave it as the equals, let this one be a strict check, and then we're good to go. Let's go ahead and test this and see how it goes. Sorry, do you have a question?
Just to kind of clarify myself.
Yeah.
So the contains action, that's returns the Boolean.
Yes, it does. And you know what? Let's go ahead and let's actually separate this out. So right now, I'm going to have Boolean contains potion. And this is going to be name B colon contains blue potion. And now I have that separated out right there. So I have the new Boolean variable, Boolean contains potion equals name B colon contains blue potion.
And it's not giving you the error sign, so okay, got it.
It's not giving me the error sign, so that's a good sign. I could end up injecting the Boolean values into our if statement. It is a little tricky just because I would really need to have 2 Booleans here because it won't be simultaneously true for both A and B. Is there a condition where both item A and B could contain the name blue potion?
No, because they are not moving.
Right. Theoretically, it could happen if 2 blue potions collide with each other somehow, but in practice, it couldn't possibly happen because our stuff can't move. The potions are stationary, so it's okay. It's kind of an interesting question, I thought. That being said, let's go ahead and run this and let's see what we've got. We have, once again, jaunty music. I move over to the quest giver and I ask him kindly, give me a quest, and he kindly asked me, go get me some barrels. And now I walk over and I'm about to pick up the first one. And I picked a potion. I have 1. and now I have 2. And as I pick up each of these potions, they are removed from the game, and at this point, I have now collected all 5. They're all removed from the game as well, so I can't intersect with them anymore. At this point, I have basically completed the quest. And so the next question would become, what do I do when the quest is completed? But I think that is going to be the meat of this particular session. So is there any questions regarding how the collisions work, how we handle the logic for figuring out what we're colliding with, how we removed them? Questions about anything at all in the game that we've just worked in?
This was very helpful. I finally understood how collision works.
Great. Okay. Well, with that in mind, I'm gonna
like line
Yes.
40-ish.
Yes, absolutely. And I can also, if it would be helpful, I can paste the text for this into the Slack channel. Did you want to see a particular part of this code?
Yeah, just right there. Okay, thanks.
Absolutely. So at this point, I think let's go ahead, and I believe we have a break scheduled at this point, just a few minutes early, but
All right. As always, thanks.